Two brown envelopes sat on the kitchen table when Laurel arrived. One had Grant written across the front in her father's careful handwriting. The other said Shane. There was no third envelope. Laurel set her coat on the chair by the door and looked at them for a long moment before she sat down. Raymond cleared his throat from the head of the table. He was 71 and still held himself like someone who expected the room to quiet when he spoke. Frances sat beside him, her hands folded, her eyes somewhere near the window. Grant was already at the table, his wife Joanne beside him with a notepad open. Shane sat across from them, and their Uncle Paul, older by a decade, invited to witness, occupied the far end. Raymond spoke first, the way he always did. Your mother and I have thought this through for some time. We're not getting younger, and we don't want to leave a mess behind. Everything's in those envelopes. Today we make it official. He slid the first envelope toward Grant. The family dry cleaning and tailoring shop on Elgin Street had been in the family for 32 years. Raymond had built it from one pressing machine and a rented storefront. Grant, as the oldest, would receive the shop, the adjoining back unit used for alterations, and the family home on Waverly Crescent. He would keep the business running, maintain the family burial plot, and host the annual get-together at Christmas. Grant opened the envelope and pulled out the property survey. Is the back lane included in the lot? Yes, Raymond said, but the access has to stay open for deliveries. You can fence the rest. Joanne leaned over and took a picture of the survey with her phone. Raymond moved to Shane's envelope. Shane had managed the commercial parking lot on the edge of downtown for the past 6 years. The one Raymond had bought as an investment in the early 90s when the land was still cheap. Shane would receive that property outright, along with a small storage building attached to it. Shane flipped to the last page. What about the income from the lot while the transfer goes through? It's already yours in practice, Raymond said. The paperwork just makes it formal. Then Raymond folded his hands on the table, and that was it. No third envelope, no mention of Laurel's name anywhere in the document spread across the kitchen table where she had done her homework as a child. Laurel waited until the room went quiet. What about me, Dad? Frances finally looked up from the window. Raymond's answer was measured, almost gentle, as if he had rehearsed it. Laurel, you and Lucas have your own home. You have a business in the city. Your brothers are the ones staying here, keeping the shop running, keeping the family name on the building. Anything we give you leaves this family. It goes into Lucas's household. It would go into my household, Laurel said. I'm the one who built it. You know what I mean. She did know what he meant. That was the part that stung the most. Uncle Paul slid a single page across the table toward her. It was a declaration confirming that she had been informed of the transfers, that she understood the assets were being given voluntarily to her brothers, and that she agreed not to contest the arrangements. Laurel read it twice. She did not read it to find something to argue about. She read it because she had learned, a long time ago, that you should always read what you are asked to sign. The document was clean and legal. It said what it said. She picked up the pen. Before I sign, she said, I want to ask one thing. Have you kept anything back for yourselves? Any income, any savings, anything set aside for when you need care? Raymond frowned. We have 4 children. That's not an answer. Laurel, Frances said softly. I'm asking because I want to understand what this arrangement actually looks like when it's finished. Grant shifted in his seat. Shane looked at the ceiling. Raymond squared his shoulders. When your mother and I need something, our children will be there. That's how families work. Laurel signed the document. Her name went down clear and even. She capped the pen and set it on the table. Raymond's expression settled into something that looked almost like relief. And then, in the same breath, without even waiting for Laurel to put her coat back on, he said, We've decided to move in with you and Lucas. Laurel looked up. The house belongs to Grant now, and he'll have renovations to see to. Shane's place is crowded. You're in the city, close to the hospital. Lucas has steady work. It makes the most sense. Laurel looked at the 2 envelopes on the table, each one belonging to one of her brothers, and then she looked at her father. No, she said. The word landed quietly, but it landed. Raymond's face changed. What do you mean, no? I mean, I won't be taking you and Mom in on my own. I'm one of 4 people in this family. If we're sharing this responsibility, I'll carry my share. But I won't carry it for Grant, for Shane, and for myself while they hold on to property that was just transferred into their names. You're their sister, Frances said. You're the daughter. Yes, and a minute ago, being the daughter meant I didn't deserve a share of anything. Now it means I'm supposed to take both of you home. Laurel looked at her brothers. How much will each of you contribute every month? If Dad has an appointment and can't drive, who takes him? If Mom is in the hospital at 2 in the morning, who stays? Not one of them answered. Laurel stood and picked up her coat. I'm not fighting about the property. I already signed. But before anyone makes plans about where Mom and Dad are going to live, we're going to agree, in writing, on what each of us is actually going to do. She drove back to Toronto that evening in freezing rain, the highway slick and dark, and she did not cry until she was most of the way home. Lucas was awake when she got in. He had the kettle on and 2 mugs out. He could always tell when she needed the mugs before he needed the words. She told him what happened. He listened. When she was done, he said, "What do you need right now?" "I need to know you understand why I said no." "I understood it before you finished explaining," he said. "I just want to make sure you're okay." She was not entirely okay, but she was clear. 2 months passed. Laurel heard things through Arla, her mother's old friend from the church quilting group, before she heard them through her own family. Arla called on a Tuesday afternoon, when Laurel was on a job site in Etobicoke, checking the cabinet installation in a kitchen renovation she had designed. She stepped outside into the cold to take the call. "Your parents left Grant's house," Arla said. "Did you know?" Laurel tightened her grip on the phone. "No, when?" "Last week," your father called a cab. According to Arla, the trouble had started almost immediately after the transfer was made official. Grant had plans for the property, and those plans included renovating the main floor to expand the shop's retail space. His eldest son had recently gotten married and was being brought into the business. The couple needed room. Raymond and Frances had been told, not asked, to move from their bedroom at the front of the house to the small room off the back mudroom. The room had been used for storage. It had a window that faced the parking pad, linoleum floors that went cold in November, and a wall shared with the dryer vent from the shop. During the evening pressing runs, the heat that came through was stifling. During the night, without it, the room dropped. Frances had started coughing within a week. Raymond had gone to Grant about it. Grant said they were welcome to stay as long as they needed to. But the renovation had to move forward. The business depended on it. It was now Grant's property, and Grant had to make decisions that were right for the business. Raymond had not said another word. He had packed 2 bags and helped Frances into a cab. They were at Shane's house now. "How is Mom?" Laurel asked. "She sounded tired when I spoke with her. She said the cough has mostly cleared up, but she's not sleeping well in a new place." Laurel asked for Shane's wife Tina's number and called her that evening. Tina answered on the 3rd ring, already sounding worn out. There were children in the background, the television, something spilling. "I didn't want to call you," Tina said. "Shane said to handle it ourselves." "How are they actually doing?" A pause. "Your mom is okay. She moves slow in the morning and she doesn't eat much. Your dad is up early and then tired by noon. The house has 3 kids under 11, and Shane's hours are all over the place with the parking lot management. I'm not complaining, I'm just being honest with you." "I know," Laurel said. "You shouldn't have to carry this alone either. Your mom asked about you this morning. She didn't ask about Grant." Laurel said she would drive down on Saturday. She would bring Frances's prescription refills, and they could talk properly then. She spent the drive west listening to the CBC and trying not to think too many steps ahead. Shane's house was a semi-detached on a street built in the 70s. It was warm inside and full of the specific chaos of a house with young children, shoes in the hall, a craft project half finished on the dining room table, the smell of something baking. Frances was in the guest room, sitting up in bed with a magazine she was not really reading. She looked smaller than she had 2 months ago. Laurel brought in the prescriptions, a bag of groceries, and a box of tea Frances liked. She sat on the chair by the window and they talked, or tried to, for an hour. Frances asked about Lucas and the children. Laurel asked about her sleep and appetite. Raymond came in and out, nodding at Laurel, but not meeting her eyes. Before Laurel left, Tina followed her to the front step. "Send me money for food and medication," Tina said. It wasn't a demand. It was closer to exhaustion finally reaching the surface. "I'm not asking for much. $300 a month. I can't feed 7 people on our budget." Laurel asked her to write down the real costs, groceries, medications, any appointments, and divide it by 4. "I'll pay my quarter directly," she said. But that means Grant and Shane need to pay theirs too. This isn't a calculation I'm making to be difficult. It's the only way this doesn't all end up on you or on me. Tina gave a short, tired laugh. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, Laurel said, but it's fair. She drove home in the dark and thought about how often fair and simple had nothing to do with each other. She got the call on a Wednesday morning in February, when the city was in the middle of the kind of cold snap that makes people question why anyone settled in this part of the country. It was Shane. His voice was tight in a way she had only heard from him once before, when they were teenagers and he had broken their mother's car window by accident and didn't know how to say it. Mom fell. She's in emergency. Which hospital? Here in town. The one off Wellington. She tripped on the threshold between the hall and the bathroom. Her wrist took the impact, but she hit her head on the doorframe. She was on the floor for a few minutes before Dad found her. What time did it happen? Around 5 this morning. Laurel was already at the closet pulling out her coat. I'm coming. 2 hours. When she arrived, Shane was in the waiting room. Grant had not yet appeared. Raymond was sitting very still near the door to the treatment area, his coat still on. Laurel sat beside her father. He did not turn his head, but his jaw moved slightly. She was calling out, he said quietly. I heard her from the bedroom. I didn't know right away what it was. She's going to be okay, Dad. She's been tired, he said, more than she lets on. Laurel went to the nursing station, introduced herself as Francis's daughter, and got the update. The wrist was fractured, a Call's fracture, which the nurse said was common in older women, and which would need casting and several weeks of recovery. The head contact had produced a minor laceration and some bruising, but no signs of concussion. Francis was awake and oriented and asking for tea. Laurel went back to the waiting room and took 4 printed pages from her bag. Grant arrived 20 minutes later, stamping snow from his boots, already talking about how bad the highway had been. He looked at the pages in Laurel's hands. What is that? A care schedule, she said. Mom's going to need a cast for 6 to 8 weeks. She'll need help with bathing, dressing, meals, medication. She can't go back to Shane's. The house isn't set up for someone with a fracture and Tina is already stretched. We need to figure out where she lives and who does what. You couldn't wait until we knew more? The more we know, the clearer I want to be. Grant folded his arms. Shane stared at the floor. Laurel spread the pages on the chair beside her. She had divided the fixed responsibilities into columns. Who managed medications, who handled doctor follow-ups, who stayed on weekday evenings, who covered weekends. Cost for a part-time home support worker were listed and divided into 4. We each take a quarter, she said. Money or time. Anyone who can't do money takes more time. Anyone who can't do time pays more money. Any absence gets logged and everyone sees it. You're treating this like a business meeting, Grant said. Someone has to. She's our mother. Laurel looked at her oldest brother. Yes, she is. So which day this week are you coming to help her wash her hair? Because with a cast on her right wrist, she's going to need someone. He didn't answer. Shane picked up one of the pages. He read through it slowly. Then he picked up the pen Laurel had set on top and wrote his name in the first evening slot. That seemed to do something to Grant. He pulled the page toward himself, read it, and chose a Saturday morning. Marking it hard enough that Laurel could see the pen had gone through to the next sheet. Raymond, who had been sitting quietly through all of it, reached over and took the last page. He held it for a long time. Then he said, I didn't leave anything for you. Laurel did not fill the silence. I thought the boys would be here, he said. I thought the property meant they would stay. He put the page down on his knee. I was wrong about how that works. It was a plain sentence, no apology attached to it, no speech prepared. Just the words, said to the floor. Raymond signed the last page. He signed it in the space Laurel had marked with a small asterisk and the word Dad. Francis was discharged 4 days later. Laurel had spent those 4 days arranging a ground-floor apartment 2 blocks from the Wellington Street clinic. 1 bedroom, a wide bathroom door, textured tile, no steps from the street. She had hired Bev, a retired PSW who had relocated to the area and was taking private clients. Bev came 5 mornings a week. She helped Francis with hygiene, exercises for the wrist, medication management, and the slow and patient work of keeping someone functional when one hand was wrapped in plaster. Laurel had paid her first month's share of the rent directly to the landlord and sent Grant and Shane their payment information separately. She had transferred nothing to anyone in the family. The money went to the building, to Bev, and to the pharmacy. Grant paid on time but complained about it through a separate message to Shane that Tina forwarded to Laurel without comment. Shane paid and said nothing. The schedule held better than Laurel had expected. Shane drove Frances to her follow-up appointments and took notes on the back of whatever was nearby. Grant came on Saturday mornings for about 90 minutes before his phone started pulling him back to the shop. Raymond learned, slowly, how to help Frances with her sling and how to read the medication chart on the fridge. There were gaps. Grant missed 2 evenings in March and sent Joanne instead. Joanne stayed for 40 minutes both times. Laurel noted it without saying anything to Grant directly. She wrote it in the shared log where everyone could see it. Shane saw it too. One evening he called her not to argue, but just to say, "I want you to know I've been keeping track. You're doing more than your share." "So are you," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I used to think you were being stubborn. Back when you wouldn't just let them come to you." "I know. I get it now." He paused. "I got it a while ago, actually. I just didn't say it." Frances recovered more slowly than the doctors had initially suggested. Her wrist healed on schedule, but the fall had shaken something loose in her sense of herself. She moved more carefully, slept more, spoke less. One afternoon in early April, when Laurel came for her regular visit, Frances was sitting up in bed with something in her lap. It was a small wooden sewing box, the kind with a lift-out tray for thread and needles, the kind that sat on a dresser for years and got dusted around but never moved. Frances beckoned Laurel closer. Inside the box beneath the tray were a roll of thin papers tied with a rubber band and a folded piece of cardboard. Laurel recognized the cardboard first. It was the back cover of a notebook. She had used the same kind in high school, the cheap ones from the drugstore. She unrolled the papers. They were blueprints, hand-drawn in pencil, measured carefully, labeled in Laurel's own teenage handwriting, floor plans for a small addition to a house, elevations for a deck structure, a cross-section through a wall framing assembly. Her teacher in shop class, Mr. Willett, had told her she had a real instinct for spatial thinking, and that she should consider a career in trades or construction management. These were the drawings she had done that year. She had thought they were thrown out. Beneath the blueprints was a folded piece of paper, a note in Mr. Ouellette's handwriting, addressed to Raymond and Frances, asking them to consider letting Laurel enroll in the technical training stream the following year. The note said she had an uncommon ability to read structure, to understand how things were built and why, and that it would be a waste not to encourage it. And then in the bottom corner of the box, a small stack of business cards held together with a rubber band. Laurel's company logo on each one, her name, her phone number. Several were worn at the edges. "Where did you get these?" Laurel asked. "People would show me," Frances said slowly. Her voice had become quieter since the fall. "When they had work done, they showed me the cards. I asked for one." Laurel looked at the pile. There were at least 15 different print runs. Some from the early years when the logo was different. Some from the version she had updated 4 years ago. "And the blueprints? How did you keep these?" Frances looked at her hands. "Your father wanted to clear out the storage room. You were in the other room. I took them before he got to that box." Laurel sat down on the edge of the chair. "Mr. Ouellette's letter," she said. "Did Dad ever read it?" "Yes." Frances was quiet for a moment. "He said you would find a husband and have a family. That learning to build things was not going to help you find a husband." Laurel had known this. She had not known her mother had stood in the same room, said nothing, and then quietly kept the blueprints in her sewing box for 22 years. "Why didn't you ever tell me you had them?" Frances looked at her daughter with eyes that held something complicated in them. Not guilt exactly, but the specific exhaustion of someone who has spent decades knowing they made the wrong choice and deciding, day after day, not to look at it directly. "I was proud of you," she said. "I just didn't know how to say it to your father." Laurel held the blueprints in her lap. The pencil lines were still clean. The measurements were still readable. "I understand that you were afraid of him," she said. "I always understood that, but I was the one who paid for it." Frances's eyes filled. A tear moved down one side of her face and she let it go without wiping it. "I know," she said. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I know that too." They sat together for a while without speaking, the sewing box open between them. Laurel could hear Bev moving in the kitchen, the sound of something being set on the counter. Outside, someone was walking a dog past the window. "I was wrong," Frances said. The words came out simply, without a cushion of explanation around them. No reference to the family's circumstances, no mention of Raymond's temper, no list of reasons why silence had seemed like the safest answer at the time. Just the three words placed carefully in the air between them. Laurel rolled the blueprints back up and set them on the bedside table. Then she sat with her mother for a while, her hand near Frances's hand but not quite holding it, until Frances's eyes closed and her breathing slowed. When Laurel left, she took her business cards with her. She left the blueprints beside the bed, where Frances could see them. Frances died in September, in the apartment, in the early morning. Shane was there. He had come for the overnight shift and was sitting beside the bed reading when her breathing changed. He called Laurel first. "I'm coming," she said. "Drive safe," he said. "Take the 401, not the back roads. There's construction on the county road." When she arrived, Raymond was sitting on the other side of the bed with his coat still on. He had been sleeping in the apartment on and off for the past 2 weeks, unwilling to leave for more than a few hours. Laurel sat beside her mother. Shane stood in the doorway, giving her space. Outside, the sky was doing what September skies in Ontario do, a little of everything at once, some light and some cloud, and the particular quality of air that says summer is leaving and doesn't particularly care how anyone feels about it. Frances's funeral was held at the church on Cedar Street. Grant stood near the entrance greeting people as they arrived, which was the thing he was best at, the version of family responsibility that happened in public and in view of neighbors. Laurel sat in the second row with Lucas and their daughter, who was 12, and sat with her spine straight and her hands in her lap, watching everything with the kind of serious attention that reminded Laurel of herself at that age. At one point, when the minister had finished speaking and people were talking quietly among themselves, Laurel heard two women behind her, neighbors of her parents, speaking in low voices. Such a shame. The daughter lives in Toronto, beautiful home, and the parents ended up in a rental apartment. That's children for you these days. She did not turn around. Lucas's hand found hers. Shane came and sat beside her a few minutes later. He had heard it too. "I should say something to them." "It's okay." "It's not okay. It's not even accurate." "I know," Laurel said, "but today isn't the day." Shane looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "You arranged the apartment. You arranged Bev. You made the schedule. You made us show up when we would have found reasons not to. You showed up too. Not the same way." Laurel didn't argue with him. 7 weeks after the funeral, Raymond came to Toronto. Shane drove him down for a cardiology appointment, and afterward they stopped at Laurel and Lucas's house for dinner. Raymond walked through the house. Slowly, the way older people walk through spaces they are encountering for the first time, with the knowledge that they will not encounter many things for the first time. He stopped in the front hallway where her daughter's school project was mounted on the wall, a set of hand-drawn structural plans for a treehouse, done for a science and technology fair. Her daughter had won second place. The plans were detailed and precise and showed clearly that the girl understood how weight was distributed through a frame. Raymond stood in front of it for a long time. "She drew these herself?" he asked. "Herself," Laurel said. "Her teacher said she had a natural instinct for it." Raymond looked at his granddaughter's name printed at the bottom of the sheet. Then he looked at Laurel. He did not say anything about the sewing box or the blueprints, or Mr. Ouellette's letter. He did not say anything that would require either of them to step into the years that had already passed. But he said, "Do you have a hammer?" Laurel found him a hammer and a nail. He measured with his thumb, knocked the nail in straight on the first try, and adjusted the mount until the plan was level. Then he stepped back and looked at it in the light from the hall window. "There," he said. "Now it's properly hung." He handed the hammer back and went to sit at the table where Lucas was pouring tea. Laurel stood in the hallway alone for a moment. She looked at her daughter's plans hanging on the wall where anyone coming in could see them. Then she went into the back room where she kept her files and opened the cardboard tube where she had put the blueprints from her mother's sewing box. She did not take them out to hang on the wall. She already knew what they were and what they had cost her and what they had eventually led to. She had a crew of 11. She had clients who called her before they called anyone else. She had built something from the space that had been left over after everything else was distributed. She slid the tube back onto the shelf. When Grant's turn came, and it did come, as these things tend to, it arrived not as a disaster but as a quiet rearrangement. His son needed the front rooms for the expanded retail operation. The logical solution, the son explained, was for Grant and Joanne to take the smaller suite in the back building, just temporarily, while the renovations were sorted out. The same back building, the same low ceilings, the same wall shared with the dryer vent. The same room where Frances had coughed through her first November in someone else's version of the house she had lived in for 30 years. Grant called Laurel to complain about it. She had listened. She had not said what she was thinking. She had simply asked, "Have you talked to your son directly about what you need?" and let him work out the rest. On a Saturday in November, Laurel was at a job site in the Junction, reviewing the framing on a residential addition she had designed. The winter light was thin, and the air had that particular bite that arrives around Remembrance Day and doesn't leave until April. She was checking the header clearance above the new window opening when her phone rang. It was her daughter. "Mom, are you coming home for dinner? I'm making the soup." "I'll be home by 6, Laurel said. "Okay. Also, I decided where to enter my treehouse plans. There's a provincial design competition for students. The deadline is January." Laurel looked at the wall framing in front of her. The studs running plumb, the header sitting square, the structure doing exactly what structure is supposed to do when it is built right. "Enter it," she said. "You don't think it's too much? The competition is for grades 9 and up, and I'm only in grade 7. "Enter it anyway," Laurel said. "Don't wait until someone tells you you're ready. Send it in and find out." Her daughter was quiet for a moment, in the way that meant she was actually considering it. Turning it over, the way she turned everything over before she made up her mind. "Okay," she said. Laurel hung up and went back to checking the framing. The header sat level. The structure was sound. Everything that needed to hold weight was holding it. She had not received any of what her brothers had been given. She had not asked for it back, and she did not want it. What she had was hers. Built from the middle of everything she had been told was not worth building, held together by her own measurements and her own judgment. Her daughter would never be told to put her drawings in a box. That was the thing Laurel had decided, quietly and without announcement, the night she drove home from her parents' kitchen table, through the freezing rain, with 2 brown envelopes still on the table behind her, and not a single one with her name on it. Whatever else got divided or withheld or handed to someone else, that one thing would not be taken. She squared the last measurement, signed off on the inspection sheet, and drove home.